Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. Hi guys, my name is Jonathan Patterson. I'll be teaching your intermediate Hebrew class online this summer. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I'm sorry that it's taken me so long to get this introduction video posted for you. Kind of my intro of myself as well as my intro to our workbook that we're going to be using, the Ben Zvi's Readings in Biblical Hebrew. But I wanted to just take a few moments and introduce myself to you, let you guys know if there's anything that I can do to help you. I have been in your situation as a student in intermediate Hebrew. I have not taken it online, so I applaud those of you who are taking it online. And I hope that this will be a wonderful learning experience. I hope that you guys are able to grasp the material and we'll walk away from this class with a greater appreciation for biblical Hebrew. You may have recognized what I just read to you as Genesis 1:1. I want you to go ahead and take out your Hebrew Bible, Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. This is my paperback copy. If you don't have your copy with you, go ahead and pause this video and go get your copy and come back, because we are going to work through this real quick. There are a few things that I want to show you in your text as you begin to prepare to start your translations. So have your Hebrew Bible, your copy of BHS. One of the things I have that I really enjoy is a Reader's Hebrew Bible. This is a great tool for me because it has words that you may not be familiar with. It highlights the proper nouns. Unfortunately, it is of absolutely no help for us in our intermediate class because it lacks the textual apparatus that we're going to be working with. So when you get out your Hebrew Bible and you start your assignment, the first thing that you're going to want to do after you've looked up your passage is give a rough translation, a wooden translation, if you will, basically translating every word. One of the things I've always found personally is that a rough translation really kind of helps me to get a grasp on each word, each verb stem, tense, things of that nature, so that it can really kind of help me to understand exactly what the Hebrew is trying to say before I start trying to smooth it out into a smooth English translation. So obviously there are going to be some words that you're unfamiliar with. That's fine. You've only had one semester of Hebrew up until this point, I assume. So go ahead, pull out your lexicon, use it as necessary to find these words. But as you come across these words that you're unfamiliar with and you're looking them up in your lexicon, go ahead and try to commit those to memory as well, so that you can be learning more and more vocabulary. I know we do a whole lot with vocabulary on the intro side, not as much on the intermediate side, but certainly you want to be going ahead and trying to commit some of those vocabulary words to memory as you look them up in your lexicon. So once you've gotten your wooden translation, your rough translation, then you're going to start making notes about any questions that you have, the words that you're unfamiliar with. Identify any verbs that you had trouble parsing, things of that nature. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your Scott Simplified Guide to the BHS. That little white pamphlet is really a great resource and actually is incredibly important for the work on which you're about to embark. And so if you don't have a copy of Scott's Guide, I strongly urge you to go ahead and get one just as soon as possible, because it really is going to be a good help for you. In Scott's Guide, you're going to be able to look up the various accents, which is going to give you kind of an indication of your punctuation for your English translations. You're going to know where to pause, where to put commas, periods, things of that nature. Accents are also helpful to let you know when dialogue is changing, perhaps from an introduction to direct speech, those types of things. Accents also kind of give you some idea of emphasis as well. So certainly accents are extremely important. Just a brief excursus on accents. Pay careful attention anytime you have the Revia, the Athnach, or Zakef Katon. Those are the three biggies. Those are the ones that hopefully you're already familiar with from your work in intro. But certainly if not, you need to be committing those to memory and knowing what each one of those accents represents. So you'll find those in Scott's Guide as well, along with all of the other accents. Your Scott's Guide is also going to help you interpret any textual variants that you may come across, and you'll find those down here at the bottom of your page in BHS, right down here. These are your textual variants. And we're going to look, just for instance, at Genesis 1:1, the very first word, Bereshit. You see there is a little A beside the word Bereshit, and you can't really see it there. Maybe you can see it a little more clearly there. That little A means that you have a textual variant. That lets you know that there is another reading in a different manuscript or in several different manuscripts. And your textual apparatus is going to be able to help you identify what those variant readings are, as well as manuscripts that those variant readings occur in. So in your copy of BHS, go ahead and look down to the bottom of the page, and you're going to find chapter 1, verse 1. It's the very first one, obviously, and then letter A. And it is the only variant that we have in chapter 1, verse 1. So that's extremely helpful. You don't have to go looking through B, C, D, or E, or however many. And so when you see that, you're going to have a series of symbols, abbreviations, or in this case, Greek words. And you need to know what those words and symbols, what those abbreviations mean. Now, when you have Greek words, as is the case here, you're going to have to translate those for yourself. And I understand that may be difficult if you've never had Greek. It may be difficult even if you have had Greek. I understand that as well. But do the best that you can. Get a Greek lexicon and try to translate those words as best you can so that you understand what the variant is there. As for the symbols, if you look in the back of your Scott's Guide, there's a code that tells you what the various symbols mean. There's also a code for the abbreviations and then what manuscripts they refer to. You also will notice, hopefully you've looked through your BHS, particularly in this prolegomena, and you notice that it also contains a list of the various symbols and abbreviations, and then kind of gives you the Latin for what those mean. If you don't know Latin, there is a Latin translation in here as well, so that helps out also. So you'll be able to turn to the back of your Scott's Guide and find the necessary information to translate all of those various symbols, those abbreviations, and figure out what those various readings are and where they come from. Using the Scott's Guide, you're also going to be able to look at the Masora notes in the margins, which hopefully you've read about already. However, really your textual apparatus is going to be the bulk of what we do, the apparatus at the bottom of the page. The next thing that you're going to do after you've identified those words that you have trouble with, after you've worked through your textual variants, is address some syntax issues, how you translate certain phrases. In section 4, I believe it was 4A, there are some instructions about syntax. Now the Benz V workbook and this course in general typically points you to the classical method of syntax, and hopefully you've read all about that. As a matter of fact, even if you have read it already, go back and as soon as you're done watching this video and read that material again. It talks about a classical way to do syntax in that your resources are categorized according to grammatical elements. For instance, your Waltke and O'Connor reference, Introduction to Biblical Hebrew Syntax, Arnold and Choi, Guide to Biblical Hebrew Syntax, all of those are more classical syntax reference where you have categories. Now, the downfall to using those in this class, and I say this because I was a student here, I've used this method, I'm familiar with what other students have done here at NOBTS and elsewhere. The downfall is typically what we do is use those resources to find a translation that matches what we already know an English version says. So essentially, we're just validating what we already know that the text says. So we're looking for syntax categories that are going to translate the verse in the way that we know or think that it should be read. And unfortunately, that's not true translation. That's really just a validation of an already existing translation. Another method that we'll hopefully have an opportunity to look at some this summer is discourse analysis, which is a fairly new approach towards syntax. And your workbook is not really geared toward that, and really this class in general is not geared toward discourse analysis. But I really would like to start introducing it to you now so that you'll be aware of it, particularly when you move on into later Hebrew classes. Hopefully, if you move on to advanced exegesis classes, then you'll have some familiarity with discourse analysis. In past semesters, when this class has been taught, Dr. Christy Miller, who taught the class online before me, had introduced an assignment on discourse analysis in place of the final assignment, the annotated bibliography. I have left the annotated bibliography in its place, and we're not going to do an assignment on discourse analysis, but I am going to be posting some readings in discourse analysis later on in the summer, and requiring that you read those, and we'll probably add a discussion board post, a discussion board forum about discourse analysis, so that you can post any questions or comments you have, and so that I can know that you've read that material and are familiar with it. But I want to go ahead just real quick and demonstrate for you the difference here in Genesis 1 between a classical syntax method and discourse analysis. It may not make a whole lot of sense to you right now, I understand, but I want to give you some introduction so that as you move through your translation work this summer, you'll hopefully be able to recognize and understand the difference between classical method and discourse analysis. For instance, Genesis 1:1 starts with the word berashit. The root of this is rosh, which means head or start, and the beit is obviously your preposition. So you've got in the first, in the head, in the beginning. And then the verse 2 starts, v'ha'aretz haitai tohu vabohu. And then starting in verse 3, you have vav consecutive, verse 4, vav consecutive, verse 5, vav consecutive, verse 6, vav consecutive, and so on and so on. Now you know from your introductory course to Hebrew that vav consecutive is typical for past narrative, and it lets you know that we are in a past narrative form. So when we get to verse 3, we're flowing at verse 3, and God said, verse 4, and God called, and so forth and so on. But then for whatever reason, we have the first two verses that are not written in past narrative form with vav consecutives. They're written in a different form. Verse 1, you have berashit, which is a particle. Rosh, its root is obviously a noun. Verse 2 starts with a noun preceding the verb, which is a little bit unusual. Hopefully you learned in your intro class and remember from that class that unlike English, where our typical sentence construction is subject, verb, object, SVO, Hebrew uses the verb, subject, object, the VSO construction. So anytime you see the noun or the subject preceding the verb in a sentence, it ought to stand out to you, and you ought to recognize that something different is going on, be it for emphasis or whatever. So when we look at this in terms of discourse analysis, and we take this whole passage and we see that we're flowing quite smoothly from verse 3 on, we have this typically narrative form with vav consecutive after vav consecutive. But this part at the beginning, verses 1 and 2, is not vav consecutive. Now, one thing we learned in discourse analysis is that whenever we have this pattern of vav consecutives and then you have an interruption of that pattern, then you have, it's giving you some kind of offline information, something that's being added to the narrative for whatever reason. Uh, Say, for example, you were telling a story to someone of an activity that you were doing yesterday or an event that happened to you, and then you remember, oh, wait, I've got to give them some background information. So you might be saying, well, I was out with some friends and we were going to the store. I was going to buy this and blah, blah, blah. And I was walking down the aisle. Oh, by the way, I have this neighbor who I've known for like a really long time, but we don't really get along too well anymore. So anyway, I was walking down this aisle and I saw my neighbor. So you see, you had to stop and kind of give some background information, excuse me, to your audience, so that they would be able to understand the story more completely. And that's what we have here in Genesis 1:1-2 is background information to the story. So that's what. So whenever that Vav consecutive gets interrupted, we know that it's happening for a reason, and there's something there that we need to stop and ask. Okay, why is the story being interrupted? Why is this information being given as an aside? What is the point of it? And it happens for a variety of reasons, and we don't really have time to get into that right now. I don't want to take 30 minutes on this video, but just know that essentially a part of discourse analysis is really to take an entire unit of text and look and see what's happening with verbal changes, and to be able to know how to translate, even what tense to translate. And I bring this up because up until this point, you've probably thought of the Vav consecutive as a reversal element. That is to say that it takes an imperfect verb and gives it a past tense, a perfect tense, because of the Vav consecutive, or a perfect verb that is translated imperfect because of the Vav consecutive. But if you've read your Cook article, and hopefully you have, that's not really the case, is it? It's not that simple definition that we like to ascribe to it as we are learning introductory material. So that's just a little introduction to discourse analysis. Like I said, I don't expect you all to completely understand discourse analysis today, but we do want to try to do a little bit more work in discourse analysis, because I really think that that's going to be a big help for you, particularly those of you who are continuing on in Hebrew, taking advanced exegesis classes and things like that. I certainly think that an introduction to discourse analysis is going to help you. And so as you're working through your passages, I want you to be looking at the passage as a whole, not just individual verses or individual phrases and clauses, but look at the passage as a whole, and really notice when you have these verbal changes or different arrangements of words or clauses and things like that. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Maybe you want to go ahead and start doing some other reading on your own in discourse analysis. I really would highly recommend each of you doing so. But particularly if you're going to be taking advanced exegesis classes, if you're going to be moving on further, you certainly want to have some familiarity with discourse analysis. Once again, I'm really looking forward to working with all of you this summer, and please don't hesitate. If there's anything that I can do for you, any questions you have, any prayer concerns that you have, I want you to know that I'm here to help you, here to pray for you. Just as my professors have done for me, I want to be able to do for you. So please don't hesitate to give me a phone call, shoot me an email, whatever, if there's anything that I can help you with. I hope you have a wonderful week. Shalom.